Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nesler, co-founder and CEO of Impact Results and host of this show. If this is the first time joining us for an episode, this is something a little bit different than you're going to hear on other podcasts. If you're a business junkie, a business nerd, if you're into learning how the brands that we all know and love so much in the sport of moto have grown into what they are today or who they are today, I think you'll enjoy this show. We got something a little bit different for you on this episode. We are talking to one of the founders, one of the first members of the freestyle motocross movement. We're talking to Doug Punk Rock Parsons today. Doug is a listener to the show. That's how we met. He hit me up on Instagram and was stoked to reach out and get acquainted with him and thought he'd be a really good fit for the show because Doug had a very successful freestyle career pre-backflip era, and he gets into that a little bit on here. But it's been interesting how Doug is tried his best to stay relevant in a time when the backflip became the norm and he struggled with it. So what did he do? He started to scratch that entrepreneurial itch that he had, and it helped him extend his career. Now he's doing some pretty exciting things with his own podcast. We get into that. All in all, I think it's a really, really cool interview, and it gives you some insight into what some of these athletes do and what they go through and how they stay relevant and involved in the sport rather than just moving on and being something completely different, whatever it may be. So I hope you enjoy this episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast. If you have questions, be sure to send them to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Also, if you don't already follow me on Instagram, it's at Luke Nesler, Nesler. I tell you ahead of time who our guests are going to be before we record them. That way you can ask questions and I'll ask the guest for you. We also put some additional content related to this show out on my Instagram to further answer your questions and try to help you guys moving the needle forward. As always, I appreciate your attention. Whether you're driving to a meeting or driving to work or killing time in the office listening to this show, I'm appreciative. I'm grateful. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's get into it with Doug Punk Rock Parsons.
Welcome to the Moto Marketing Podcast, presented by RacerX, the podcast for moto industry professionals, entrepreneurs, and riders. If you want to grow your brand and business in today's digital-first world, you have to know how to turn a stranger into a fan, turn a like into a customer. You have to know how to turn attention into dollars. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you in the know on real marketing tactics that work in the moto world so that you grow your business and help grow the sport. Get ready to learn from the very same marketing experts trusted by RacerX, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, GNCC, and NBC Sports. They'll help you navigate the world of digital marketing for your moto brand. This is the Moto Marketing Podcast. Presented by RacerX.
The guy we got on the line today is somebody that once we started this show, had a couple episodes that were put out. I got this follow and I believe a message even from somebody that I really looked up to a ton when I was a kid and really was one of the pioneers of the freestyle space. And I'd always grown up watching all, the Metal Militia and this guy and that guy, and Doug Punk Rock Parsons hits me up on Instagram and I'm like, whoa, this is like a blast from the past. I feel like I'm 14 years old again or 12 years old again. Doug hit me up, listened to the show. We hopped on a call, and he's got some really cool things going on, and he's found a way to stay really relevant after his time as a professional dirt bike racer and freestyle motocross guy. So wanted to have him on the show today. Doug, welcome to the show, man. It's a pleasure to have you on and pumped to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, man, and thanks for the compliments. I really appreciate it. I don't get to do much of this talking from this perspective anymore, so I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. So you've got your own thing going on now with your podcast that I want to get into, but I want to take everybody back and give them kind of a blast from the past for those that might not have been up to date on you in a while, and they're like, holy shit, I haven't heard of this guy in forever. So let's go back to, you were racing Supercross, and then you were one of the early pioneers of freestyle and had a lot of success with that. But then something that I don't know if I just forgot or I never realized, but something that you told me is you were the pioneer for the quarter pipe event. So where did that kind of happen from your transition from top of the game, freestyle moto, to where did the quarter pipe come into play?
Well, let me take you back to really the grassroots of it all. And I was lucky and very fortunate to grow up in Ritchie Canyon. And I moved to the canyon in 1987. Before we moved there, we owned property, and I had a three-wheeler, and my mom would take me out on like the weekends or the weekdays, and I would literally ride a circle. I had a circle track around her. She'd sit there and read her magazines, and every now and then I'd come by and dust her out and get put on timeout. And then so my dad built the house out there. We moved out there, and unbeknownst to me, I lived down the street from Joel Albrecht and Jeremy Albrecht, who, if most people know from back then, he was like a mini bike prodigy. And then he got on big bikes and got hurt, and he rode for a few more years and then moved into the industry. But I was little Doug, and I was chasing him around the canyon on my 60. And because of who Joel was, a lot of people always came out to the canyon and rode. So I was really lucky to grow up riding, chasing all these pros for many, many years. And everyone would come out to the canyon like after a rainy day when there was the Supercross track would be flooded. Everyone would come out and go play riding. So I grew up mainly play riding first and then getting into racing later. And so riding in the hills for so long, that's kind of became the basis of who I was. But there wasn't really freestyle back then. And so racing is what you did to ride a dirt bike and, to be able to ride a dirt bike. So come freestyle in 97, 98, I would always ride some of the freestyle contests in the off season and make more money than I did racing. And I was like, man, that, the sport's still new. It's still too fresh, like to see if there was any future to it. But I pretty much got to a point where I had a really good season racing in 99, got a bunch of top tens, and then I got hurt. I tore a ligament on my thumb, and so I had that fixed. And when I came back, I broke my wrist, and then the next year I broke my other wrist. So I had this string of injuries, but I was riding freestyle contests in the off season. So 2001, after the 5th round, I decided I was done. I was just going to do freestyle. And so I switched over to doing freestyle. I started riding these contests, and I was bringing home like $3-4 grand a weekend. I was like showing my dad, I'm like, check this out. Cause he wasn't, it was so taboo back then to go from racing to freestyle, especially after all these years of going to amateur nationals and all this time and effort my parents put into my career. And then to switch to freestyle was just, he wasn't stoked on it. But when I started bringing home the checks, he was like, okay. And, I was at that point too, where it was either get a job or start winning Supercross. And freestyle just enabled me to keep riding a dirt bike. And I was actually a freestyle guy all along. It just, there was never freestyle. So that burning desire to want to be a freestyle rider was like already there and was already lit. So it was just like a no-brainer once I started making money. And that's kind of how I got into freestyle.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was interesting about the freestyle guys that I don't know if it was done intentionally, if it was just it came with the territory of kind of being different from Supercross and rebelling, but it's something that I think has allowed me to, or other just fans of the sport as well, to remember names like you guys. It's everybody had a character and a name. You had Cowboy the Kenny Bartram, you had Doug Punk Rock Parsons, you had all these characters. Did you guys realize at the time or purposely build these characters and these brands, or was it just like, yeah, that's a rad name, it kind of rhymes, I'm going to do my thing with it? Or was it, man, I really want to stick in the minds of these fans, this is the role I'm going to take? Like the person that Brian Deegan is on the freestyle course versus off, at least today, is very different. It was the character that he played and the character you played and that Kenny Bartram played. Walk me through that. Was that intentional, or did it just kind of unpack itself?
Well, what happened was, right as I got into freestyle, ESPN was just eating it up. So because I had rode these contests in the off season, I had points stacked up. So when it came to like my first year in 2001, I qualified for X Games because I had ridden the last two qualifiers. So getting into X Games at that time, if you can remember from back then, they would rerun the contest over all day long for weeks on out. So I was getting a ton of TV coverage. And at the same time, Nick Ciotti and Kurt Bender started MX Machine, and I was always shooting photos with them. So I was getting in the magazines, I was on TV, and I was filming videos with whoever was filming at the time. So I was kind of hitting all my bases, and everyone else that was, right there with me too, like Metzger and McElroy and Renner and Feist and Twitch. I remember one contest, Metzger got us all together, and he's like, we need to have an identity. We really need to play this TV coverage thing. And everyone was coming up with names, and I was like, well, I don't want to create a character. That's not who I am. I'm just Doug. I listen to punk rock music. I've always been into Pennywise and NoFX, all these bands. I don't want to create a character and be like a sellout. So that's kind of where the punk rock Parsons thing came from. And from there, it just kind of took a life. I remember one contest, Cameron Steele was announcing, and he used to call me Sweet Dougie, and I hated it. I hated it so much. And I remember after one contest, Next Games qualifier, I went up to the stands where he was announcing, and I grabbed the mic out of his hand, and I go, Sweet Dougie's dead. It's punk rock Parsons from now on.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And then it's stuck.
So then
that's amazing.
I just kind of played off that, even though I wasn't really like that hardcore of a punk rock guy, but I was really into punk rock music, and I was really into like being independent, being like who you wanted to be. So that's kind of like where I got it from. So
did you, I've got my timeline a little kind of foggy and confused. So from the peak of your career to when the quarter pipe became a thing, had you kind of already moved on and you weren't really one of the premier guys anymore, but you were just riding and doing your thing, and then you discovered this, giving this whole quarter pipe thing a shot? Or were you at the peak and then it was something you discovered in an off season and brought it? Like, did it bring you back to the forefront of the sport, or were you already there all that time? Walk me through that transition, because I know that's, if anything, that's kind of probably your biggest stamp on the sport, at least currently, wouldn't you say, as far as what you've left behind?
Yeah, so I'm in the thick of doing contests. I qualified for 7X Games, Gravity Games, and I was riding more contests and demos than I wanted to, and I was just starting to get burnt out. And the one thing that really didn't jive with me was the judging. I was so used to racing, and when you cross that finish line first, no one else can take it away. So the whole idea, at first it started with the Red Bull Ride to the Hills. I wanted to create a contest. It stems from two things. One, not doing the flip, and two, wanting to create a free ride contest where it was judged by the riders, and then you didn't have to flip. And the idea was I wanted to create 3 to 5 free ride events throughout the year where guys that didn't want to flip could still make a living riding dirt bikes. And I would create these events. I would go get the TV coverage, and then I would use that to sell sponsorship. So that's pretty much what I did. And the first event was the Ride to the Hills. And then from there, I just kept thinking of new ideas. I created an event called Park FMX, which was like speed and style before there was speed and style. And then the quarter pipe came after that. And that was the third one. So I think I did 4 different things. I did a wall ride contest too, I believe.
So that wasn't something that many riders were doing as far as bringing new aspects and elements to the sport. I mean, have you kind of always had the entrepreneurial bug? Like where did, I forgot that you did Ride to the Hills and the early version of the speed and style. Like where did all that come from? I mean, just creative mindset, or, because it's definitely not something that many riders brought, was evolving the sport in that way.
Yeah, I think it comes from growing up in Ritchie Canyon and just being like super passionate about free riding and riding in the hills, and wanting to share that with everyone else, like the fans. Like I always thought the heart of every rider starts in the hills or the desert. Usually when you get into dirt bikes, your dad takes you to the desert or he takes you out in the hills, and then from there it progresses to the racetrack. But I thought the true essence of every rider, no matter what, is free riding. So
just getting back to that.
Yeah, I wanted to build that up. I wanted to promote it. But I also, because I grew up in Ritchie Canyon, I saw a lot of amazing things. I saw the Crusty Demons evolve. They were coming out there filming before it was even a video. And I just saw a lot of amazing things, riders, different types of jumps, a lot of evolution, a lot of history. And I think I wanted to share that with everyone. And that was one way to create a job for myself, and then also share that with everyone else, because I knew from watching so many people come out and film videos in the hills and then turn those into videos and then be successful. I knew that I could take a contest in the hills, which had been done once before, but there was a couple things they didn't do right. And the Blue Torch was the first one, Survival Tour. And so I took what they got wrong and I changed it. And I think that's why Ride to the Hills was so successful. But it was mainly just, I saw an opportunity to create something and, create a job for myself. And all the riders that came to all my events, I wouldn't have been able to do anything without them. And, I owe everything to those guys that did the quarter pipe contest, that did Park FMX, that did Ride to the Hills. They're a huge part of, bringing my idea to life.
Yeah, no doubt. That's rad. I didn't realize how many events you created and brought to life. The last thing I want to touch on with the events, though, is to walk me through the quarter pipe. I mean, it's just the whole thing is just insane to me still to watch. And now you've got Axel Hodges doing the first alley-oop. And where did that come from? I mean, was it just a hip in the middle of the hills and you're like, man, I think we could actually do a full quarter pipe? Or did you build a ramp and you're like, I'm going to huck myself off this? Where in the heck did this come from? Because it's one of the most just jaw-dropping things that I think is in the freestyle sport right now.
Yeah, it's the new step up, definitely. So I forget what year it was. Maybe it was 04 or 03, 04 or 05. I'm not sure, but we were at X Games in LA, and it was the first year Danny Way built the mega ramp. And there was a few of us and we were standing there looking at it, and we were like, dude, we could hit that on our dirt bike right now. And as soon as I heard someone say that, and I was looking at it and I was thinking the same thing, I'm like, that's the first thing I'm going to do next week when I get home, is I'm going to build a quarter pipe. And that's what I did. Dane Herron was working at Red Bull at the time, and he was a integral part in Ride to the Hills. So I had a relationship with him, and I came back and I talked to him and Adam Barker, who was a producer for the Fuel TV M80 series. I went to him. We came up with this idea to turn one of the episodes into a quarter pipe contest. We went to Dane and we told him our idea, and he gave me $10,000. and we built the first quarter pipe, and then from there we did it again the next year. But that was basically, I got the idea from looking at Danny Way's mega ramp at X Games, and my mindset is always thinking about like, well, that could work. No one's done that yet, and it could work. That's always been the light bulb in my head goes off when I'm like, oh, that's an idea no one's ever done, and I can make that work. And so
do you have to pitch that idea and sell it to, like, how did it go from that you're like, I'm doing this weekend, to one of the premier freestyle events in the X Games? Was it your idea? Did they kind of take it and run with it with or without your permission? Did you have to sell it to get for the X Games, to sell the idea for them to be able to consider it? Like, how did it go to the main stage from just this concept that you had?
Well, there wasn't really any there. I didn't really have any patents, or there wasn't. I had an entertainment attorney, and I talked to them about it, and there wasn't really any way for me to lock it down and license the rights to them to use. And at the time, you got to remember, this was in 06 or 07 that I built the first quarter pipe. So it hasn't been, it's only been a couple years since it's been in 3 X Games. So it was not that many people really wanted much to do with it because it was so gnarly. I know Renner did some whip thing for Red Bull, and that was just basically, him taking the measurements of the dirt quarter pipe lip and going to Red Bull and, them building the setup. But it wasn't until a few years ago when Ash Hodges, Axel's brother, I think he had a main part in putting it in X Games. But yeah, I wish I got some sort of licensing rights or something, but yeah, I just get credit as the creator, I guess.
Yeah, it's still, I mean, dude, it's rad. It's your way of leaving your mark on that sport, and now you've do you still ride currently?
Well, yeah, I just bought a brand new 450 Honda
Nice.
last weekend, so I will be riding, and I do have my eye on that quarter pipe a little bit. It's pretty gnarly, but I would love to, because I think that's maybe the only thing that's, not helped to, grow with me, is that I wasn't there riding it. I created it. We tested it out. We made a couple contests. We rode, but it was just so gnarly. People don't understand how gnarly it is to jump that thing. It's, it's massive, and it's something that I've always kind of wanted to get back to.
Yeah, that's wild. So
Yeah.
you're still pushing day in and day out, but now more so on non-freestyle related things. You've got your podcast and growing your brand with that. So kind of walk us through that. What do you have going on outside of the freestyle space?
Yeah, so the podcast thing is pretty cool. I remember I was I came across, I never even listened to a podcast until somewhere at the end of 2017. And I came across, I think it was a Dan Bilzerian episode of Rogan on YouTube. And I was like, wow, that is pretty cool. But it didn't really dawn on me, like, that purple icon app on your phone is the shows, and you can get everything. And so once I discovered that, I was just consumed. I would listen to every podcast, and at the time there wasn't really that many moto podcasts. I think there was DMXS, and there was Pulp, and then there was a few other ones, but those were like the two main ones. So I saw an opportunity, and the creator in me wanted to create something that I could tell all these cool stories that I have from, growing up in Ritchie and all the different people I rode with and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where it came from. It's been a steep learning curve for sure. It's hard to put, I've had great guests, but I feel like I could bring it a little better. So that's been something I've been working on quite a bit, is trying to perfect my hosting skills. So, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it gives you something to always be pushing and evolving. And like you said, you're your interview skills, being a better host, and just growing the craft of that. What's the main concept, the purpose of your show, of your podcast?
So I tried to focus more on just having conversations with people and not so much racing download type show. I'll leave that to the guys that are killing it right now. And basically, I just look for cool stories. I'm working on maybe trying something different, like a scripted show, and focusing on a particular event and having that person tell the story. And then I'm going to experiment with doing some scripted stuff just to see how it works. There's been a lot of times where I just wanted to put it away because I felt like everyone else is so much better. But then that's been the one main reason why I've stuck with it, is because it's challenging and it's hard, and it doesn't come as easy as riding a dirt bike. And I think it's good for me to be uncomfortable like that, and it just gives me something to work on, and over time it'll start clicking and it'll come out the way that I'm envisioning it. But yeah, mainly I just try to focus on stories or storylines, or like Paul Tabley produced and directed the Dale Earnhardt movie. Have you seen that, Blink of an Eye?
I have not, but I know what you're talking about. I'm familiar. I've heard it's pretty rad. Yeah,
it's amazing. So I had him on and we talked about the movie. And so if people have stuff going on, or just any type of anything that I think might be a really good conversation or a good story to tell that people would be interested in, try to entertain and inform at the same time, seems like that's the winning formula.
And it's interesting then, because you're I guess just you've taken a liking to the craft of telling stories. I mean, because something that I definitely don't want to forget and bring up on this show is your Netflix documentary Unchained, the untold story of freestyle motocross. So, which that came before the podcast, correct?
Yeah, that was another movie that Paul Tabley directed and produced, and I actually, when I was living in Temecula around 2012, I started writing for ESPN, and they asked me to go cover this movie that Paul Tabley was doing all these interviews for. So I went down a pro circuit and I went there to interview him, and there was like an hour break between the next guy coming in, and he's like, "Hey, you want to sit down and talk?" And I'm like, "Sure." I ended up sitting down, and he was asking me my story because I had moved to Seattle in 2008, I think. I took some time off, and he's like, "Where'd you go?" And I told him the story about not doing the flip and how I went down this gnarly path and I self-destructed and I did all this crazy stuff. And after we got done with the interview, he came up to me and he handed me a check, and he's like, "You're in the movie for sure." So that's kind of how it started. I went there to interview him for ESPN. I told him my story. He really liked it. And then a month or two later, he was looking for someone to help him organize all the interviews. And someone referred me to him, and he called me up. And from that point on, I worked on the entire film from beginning to end and got to see the whole process. So I was an associate producer. It was his movie, and he was directing it and producing it, but I got to be a part of and see everything, all the steps, and it was really cool to experience something like that. And he always made all the decisions, but he asked my opinion a lot of times, so it was really cool. And in doing all that work in 2016, we won an Emmy. And because I was an official credit on the film, I got to get my own Emmy, which was super huge.
Yeah, that's an accomplishment that not many people can say that they've achieved. Is that where you do you think that's where you got your passion for the storytelling and bringing that maybe over to the podcast? Did it come from just your involvement with that sport, or has that always been something that you're interested in?
Yeah, no, I've always been interested in storytelling, writing for sure. After I stopped writing in 2007 or 8, When I came back to Temecula and I started writing for ESPN, I found that writing articles was really the only thing other than writing that really gave me satisfaction and brought me a lot of happiness. So the writing is what I got from all the storytelling, and that kind of set me up perfectly for when this job with Unchained came up. And so with the podcast, it's mainly just taking all my experience from writing stories, from working on video stories, and turning a good audio story out now. So it's all come together and plays a big role in the podcast now.
Yeah,
but that's kind of how it all went down. The Emmy was really cool because at the time I was lost, and the Emmy was just completely unexpected. And to get a phone call saying, "Hey, we won an Emmy, and because you're an official producer on the film, you get an Emmy too," was a huge moment in me turning things back around. And so that trophy's got a lot of pride in it.
Yeah, it should, man. That's again for anybody not in the creative space. I mean, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity that not many people get, and it's I mean, from X Games to you creating all these events to winning an Emmy. I mean, there's a lot there that it's pretty damn cool for you to take a step back and look on, which I know is hard to do. It's hard to take a step back and from all the madness and look at what you've built, but it's pretty rad. I don't have an Emmy. I would love to have an Emmy. That's pretty rad.
Yeah, I know. I still can't believe it. It's crazy. I'm super grateful that Paul gave me the chance, and Eric Johnson, he was a part of it too, and man, I'm really, really appreciative and grateful for it.
Yeah, that's rad. So before we hopped on, you had said you had a couple of marketing related questions that you were hoping to ask, man. So if you're down, let's go through some of those and see if we can help some other people that might have the same problem.
Yeah. So I was working on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I was rewriting how I was going to do the format and the reads and the ads. And as I was rewriting the one ad that I have a design company, a graphics design company that does my episode flyers for me. And then I do the ad read for them. And as I was rewriting the read, I started thinking about social media, and a question popped into my head was how far out are we from businesses like, let's say, those axe throwing businesses or entertainment type places? Do you guys have any of those back east?
We do. Yeah. There's actually one that there's two that go to High Point, the Pro National at High Point, and they set up and they're local and the nearest town.
So how far out are we from these types of places having a full-time photographer on staff? So when you show up with your buddies and your friends and you're hanging out, you don't have to bug anyone to take pictures. They're taking pictures already for you. They airdrop them to you, or they get your information and send them to you, and then you post them out on your channel. They're posting it out on their business channel. My thought was, how far out are we from stuff like that? With the way Instagram has changed society and culture and marketing, when is it going to be like standard that every business just automatically gives you pictures for all your social media?
Yeah, I think in some instances we're there. It's just a matter of who adopts that into their business plan and sees the value in what you just said. I mean, really, if you look at even the moto space, Simon Cudby, and he's joined up with a couple other guys, they've formed something that is kind of like that, to where it's they're 3 or 4 creatives that are creating content around this, that, and the other, and you can take it and curate, or you can take it and implement it into your social. It might not be exactly what you're talking about, but there are forms of that there to where photographers, content creators that are video and graphic and visual artists create creative for people to post, because most of the time now people understand how to post, when to post, that it needs to be frequent, it needs to be on brand, but the issue is the development of the creative. So some brands already do it, but that person that steps up and makes that into a business for the right market that sees the value in it, I mean, I don't think it's a matter of how far out are we, it's a matter of finding the people that are doing it already, because there are some doing it. I think it's here, and it's valuable. I mean, look, if there was some, we've had it in the past. I mean, we had people that would follow me around, and we create reality style content for the show. We're getting ready to do it this summer with an mountain bike team that I've put together to compete at a series. We're going to document all that, and there's going to be content that's created, and at the drop of a hat, I can grab whatever I need and I can put it on our social to promote our involvement in the sport. So I think it's here. It's just a matter of how you want to use it and finding the people that can help you create that content.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right, for sure. I think I was thinking of something else too, was with as many people that are taking pictures of their food, why aren't businesses branding the tops of their tables with some cool artwork that, okay, that's that business. Everyone's already taking pictures. How come people aren't utilizing what's already
the backdrop, so that when it's a picture of my plate of spaghetti, that it's at X, Y, and Z restaurant? Yeah, dude, I think it's a matter of the people that are in charge of making those marketing decisions, whether it's at a small mom and pop's restaurant or a big corporation like Red Bull. It's a matter of who's thinking about those small little details and implementing it. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't do it now, and that's funny because I've never thought of that example, but yeah, everybody takes pictures of their food. If you don't know what the restaurant is, if it's just a plain table, I go to Destin Beach in Florida, and there's a coffee shop there. I think it's called Wild Ass Coffee, and it's the mascot is a donkey. And everybody goes there because the name is funny, but they all take a selfie outside of the Wild Ass Coffee Shop with the Wild Ass mascot behind them. And that is what's kept that thing going as far as the virality. Every time a new shipment of people come in every week for the beach, they go there because they can't wait to take that silly photo in front of the Wild Ass Coffee Shop. So it's just thinking of way, and they knew what they were doing. That's why I bring that up. They put that sign and that obnoxious donkey logo as big as you could get it in front because they knew people were going to want to take a picture and let everybody know they were at Wild Ass Coffee. And it's done exactly what you're saying. It's consistent and continual branding.
Yeah. I think it's crazy what social media has done to culture and society and the way things are marketed. I'm interested in seeing where it's going to go in 5 years. I think it's going to go from, 5 years ago, most companies wouldn't even comment back to you on their posting, to now it's like they make sure everyone's covered. And then in 5 years from now, I think it's going to be completely it's going to consume the way marketing is structured and everything.
Yeah. And really, Doug, in a way, it has already. I mean, there's so many brands that they keep that in mind. I mean, even with what Racer X is doing, I mean, we're on that channel, so we can use them as an example. I mean, they're a print publication. But they keep a really close pulse on what are they doing on their internet. They know people want their information right now. So the way that they give you the information on Instagram right after, the crazy incident that went down between Dylan Ferrandis and Christian Craig this weekend, how they give it to you on their Instagram has to be a little bit different than how they're going to give you some type of a story or narrative around that when the publication comes out. So everybody is putting social as a priority in their plan because to stay relevant, you have to. It's not going to kill you off unless you ignore it. If a brand like Racer X ignores it, that's going to be suicide. But they've figured out how can we use it to stay even more relevant than we ever were in the past. And I think that's what other businesses have to do as well, and understand that, look, social's not just how many followers you have on Instagram and views you get on Facebook. The one of the biggest, for businesses that sell online especially, one of the biggest things you can do to really benefit from social is figure out the targeted paid advertising strategy. Hey, I want to spend $2. How can I generate 20? I want to spend 10,000 to generate 70,000. Like there's more than just posting your content. It's a matter of figuring out how you spend money and make money, how you get attention to turn it into revenue, which is what we like to say here. There's a lot of moving pieces, but where I think everybody has to start is to start. There's so many people that are intimidated by it, asking those questions that you're asking, and they use it. It paralyzes them because they're like, man, what about this? What about this? What about this? They don't just start. You have to start somewhere to figure out what the plan is that's going to work for you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, starting can be scary. I contemplated buying a new bike for this entire year, but as I got going and got more into the podcast, I realized, man, if I got a bike and I went out and rode, I could generate more exposure for the podcast than if I hired a social media team and cut up all my old video parts and did all kinds of stuff. One riding video of me going out in the hills will probably generate way more. So it's kind of why I got the bike, was to
That's cool. That is cool.
Use that as a tool to like network with people, to have better conversations on the podcast, to create more exposure. So
I've used that excuse with my wife as well. Babe, listen, this bike, it's for work, all right? Get off my back. This $8,000 e-bike, it's for work. This the 450 I just bought, yeah, it's for work. Yeah. Unfortunately, she didn't buy it quite like there's no reason for me like there is for you.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, man,
I really like listening to your podcast too.
No, I appreciate it.
Man, I came across it, and man, I ate them up, because the entrepreneur side of me is always looking for information and looking to learn, and I really enjoy listening to your podcast. They're good. They're all good.
No, I appreciate it, man, and I appreciate that, and enjoy. I enjoy doing them. We've gotten a really cool response, and I just had Donnie Imler Jr. on just before you, and was talking about just the overwhelming response of people. There's this quiet group of moto marketing nerds like myself that are out there that are interested in business but are also interested in moto. I didn't realize quite how many were out there, and I think this, bringing stories like yours today, man, to them, it's interesting. I was interested to hear what you had to say, and that's why we do it. And if somebody can pick up one thing from one of these episodes, then mission accomplished. But I definitely have fun doing them. Man, I enjoyed having you on. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy and you have stuff going on. Before we go, I want to make sure I don't forget to do this. Where can we follow you? What's the social channels? Plug the podcast. Where can they listen to the show for those that would be interested in getting more of your content?
Yeah, so my personal stuff is Doug Parsons 23 Instagram, and then the podcast is the Moto X Show on all the handles, and you can get it on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a YouTube channel. I've got some of the episodes where it's just the audio, so I'm working on maybe uploading the rest of them and getting a video proportion to it, and that's awesome. Pretty much it. Instagram's usually where I'm hanging out.
That is the same here, man. Instagram is it's where it's at. So I definitely, and I've seen your content. It's even though you haven't been on a motorcycle, you've still found a way to keep it interesting. So I encourage everybody to go check it out, because I'm looking forward to seeing you get on the 450 or 250, whatever you got, the Honda, and the 450. Man, you know what? I've got a YZ 450, a 2019, and the bike I had before that was a CR 125. And you talk about ripping your pants off, man. It took me a minute to get used to it. So it's respect when you guys start throwing those things around like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I never even really thought about maybe doing any more freestyle shows. And talking to Keith Sayers, he's using those airbag landings now. And I was showing my dad a video the other day, and I'm like, look at this. Like, this is going to change everything. These guys can fold up these bags and transport them anywhere. And I would even be stoked to go ride one of these shows, like knowing that.
That's cool.
If you case it.
It's no big deal.
Yeah, so.
Awesome,
Yeah,
man.
you'll definitely be seeing me turn it up on the dirt bike here pretty soon.
Love it. Well, hey, we'll stay in touch, and appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you for listening to the Moto Marketing Podcast. If your goal is to get real, measurable results from your marketing that will grow your company revenue, then check out how Impact Media can get the same results that they have for Moto's most iconic brands by visiting thinkimpact.com. That's THINKIMPAKT.com. Have a marketing question that you want answered on the show? Send your questions to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast.